Hello, bridge builders! I'm here with some exciting news. The first volume of interviews is now available on Amazon.com. The link can be found at eatlunchandboardgame.com. I promise that all proceeds from sales of this book will go right back into this podcast and channel. Whether that is new and better audio equipment for the podcast or video equipment for the YouTube channel, or even more games to review, the money will not be wasted. Click over to Amazon and get your copy of Eat Lunch and Board Game, the first course today. And thank you for supporting the show. Welcome back to Eat Lunch and Board Game. I'm your host, Adam Collins, and with me today is co-founder and CEO of Flying Leap Games, Molly Zeff. Molly, how are you doing this evening?
What is up? Good to talk to you. I'm really excited for the interview.
Awesome. Yeah, we were talking before we started recording here. I talked to one person and he said, hey, he was telling me a story, and I'm like, are you talking about Molly Zeff? And he's like, yeah. And then later that week, I was at the my local game shop, and they were like, hey, I was listening to your podcast. Have you talked to Molly Zeff? And I'm like, 2 people in 1 week. I might need to reach out to Molly Zeff. So Molly, I came I came across your game, Wing It, one night here in St. Louis at the Schlafly game night.
Yep.
That's how I played your game, over some beers. A few beers, and that's it. So then it was on sale there at the friendly local game shop. So when people were talking about you should talk to Molly, I'm like, she's on my list, but like I said, 2 people 1 week kind of really just I made the decision, okay, I'll just reach out to her. So I did, and here you are.
Woohoo. Yeah, I'm excited. The Fantasy Shop was one of our first, I would say dozen stores ever that we've worked with, and we still love them. And they joke with me about how, that's a St. Louis store, by the way. They joke with me about how a lot of people kind of wander in and have their game, but that, they say you're still going. Like, they felt like I was one of the ones who made it. I come back to them and show them games 4 and 5, and they have had Wing It as a bestseller for quite a while now. Don't know if it still is, but it was for a while.
Last I was in, they had no copies.
That's a good sign. I should contact them. They should probably more for Christmas, which is Friday.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I was in there. I was actually going to try to pick up a copy before we did this, so I could be a little fresher on the game, but they didn't have any copies, and the employees working did not have one that I could borrow. So I got mad and left.
Well, Dustin's getting a call tomorrow.
Give him a call. Tell him, hey, so I was talking with somebody, one of your patrons. So for anybody who doesn't know what you do for the gaming community, can you give a quick bio?
Sure. So I am the head of a party game company. We make creative, quirky party games, just with a very weird sense of humor. So, through the company itself, I'd say what we add is a level of creativity to the party game genre that, really improves the replayability. The number of years you can play a party game is obviously improved by, how many different answers you could possibly come up with. And because the kind of cards that we offer and the element of coming up with, whether it's creative products or creative stories or, creative ways out of situations on your own, means that you'll never hear the same answer twice in one of our games, no matter how many hundreds of times you play. So that's something we add. And as a broader contributor to the board game community, nationally, and internationally. Well, I would say
internationally,
I coach a lot of designers and publishers for free on how to get into retail, how to get into distribution, how to get into international distribution. I let people know it's actually really easy to get into at least English-speaking countries, because those are the ones I'm familiar with getting into. It's not very hard to get into South Africa, New Zealand, Australia, the UK, Canada. So I coach people on that. And then most recently, the past year, I've worked a lot every 2 weeks and then a few times a month. I meet with a group that has co founded a national fellowship to improve diversity in the gaming industry. So, as many folks know, historically, the game industry has been extremely white and extremely male. In fact, I remember at my first trade show back in 2018, I looked around and said, "There aren't many women here." And someone else who I was saying that to said, "There are a lot of women here." So, even within, um, my own gender, I have been struck by just how few store owners and publishers I meet who are even female. And I could name on my fingers the number I've met who are black and female. So it's an industry that's lacked diversity historically. So we created a fellowship called the Horizons Fellowship. It's been funded at $30,000 and growing, and we give both biweekly sessions. So every other week we offer sessions that are coaching sessions to that crew, and open most of them to what are called the Rising Stars. Those are folks who were very qualified applicants but didn't actually land the fellowship. They are also all welcome at the vast majority of the coaching sessions. And then the fellows themselves get a free ride to the Gamma Trade Show, which is the annual board game industry trade show. And they also get a very experienced mentor who's a publisher or retailer to coach them every month as well. And all of these designers are from people who fall into one of the areas of diversity that we were trying to increase in our industry. So that includes ability. So, in terms of having maybe a disability, and also includes racial/ethnic diversity, as well as gender, as well as sexuality. So I just want to put out there that if anyone is listening and falls in, one of those minority groups I just mentioned, that the Horizons Fellowship is just in its infancy as a pilot, but we are planning to continue it next year. And we have a really incredibly committed and talented team who runs it.
That is amazing. I did not know you did that, and I applaud you. That is an amazing thing to be doing right now.
Thanks. Luckily, I get to work with people I really like.
Well, that's always a plus.
Yep. They're smart, they're committed, and you can be exactly who you are in front of them as well. So running a fellowship with people who are kind of like colleagues and you meet with every 2 weeks is also really helpful for someone like me, who's a huge extrovert but works mostly alone. I do have a co-founder and we'll work on the phone occasionally. And, that goes in, fits in spurts, but he also has a 1-year-old, is a full-time mathematician, is a part-time musician, and this is kind of like his, fifth or sixth priority. So it's mostly me working with, either occasionally him or occasionally contractors. So having had the diversity team for the fellowship has been not only really gratifying, but also really fun just to have some regular colleagues as a rare turn of events for me.
Yeah, some regular interaction is always important. Always important. Well, that's amazing. Keep up the good work. We'll put links to that in the show notes for sure. Make sure everybody has a chance to go check out the Horizons Fellowship. So, how did you get into gaming?
Ooh, that's a fun story. I actually wasn't trying to be in gaming as an industry. I decided back in 2010, which is the year that I turned 26. In fact, it was on my 26th birthday, that I needed to make a lot of money for when I went back to business school eventually. And it's funny, I just started a new job, but I knew that in 3 to 5 years I would go back to business school. This was a job in the fair trade industry. I was earning under 30,000 in Boston. And I thought, business school is really expensive. So I want to either write a book or invent something. So I thought about what I was good at, and I'm really good at failing. So I decided to write a book called How to Fail Well. And I got about a page in and thought, I have not failed enough to write this book. And I feel really good about the idea still. I feel like there was always a lot of time. There were always a lot of times when I was doing something countercultural or that you're not supposed to do, or quitting things, or having 8 jobs during the recession, which was a whole mess in itself. And I thought I could write about how I've moved on from what would traditionally be counted as quote failures. And then I decided again that maybe I needed another 30 years of failing to write a good book. So I shifted to invented something, and I thought of games because I have played them my entire life as far back as I can remember, and I love them. And I'm very creative, and I thought, my job does not have much of a creative outlet. And so, because I wanted to be creative for a living, I guess that sort of opened my mind a little to the possibilities when I was exploring a book I have. The book is all about weird, funny questions, like weird dilemmas. And I'll give an example. It's called Would You Rather? That's the book and the game. Would you rather have a ketchup dispensing navel or a nose sharpening nostril? And there's a whole there's a whole chapter on sex. There's a whole chapter on ways to die. It gets pretty rowdy in there. And I thought, you know what? I bet a bunch of adults are paid to sit around and just be weird all day and write these kinds of questions. And that is a skill set that I have. I could definitely sit around and be weird all day, but I am not using that skill set. So I thought, wouldn't it be cool to be paid to be weird for a living? And that idea of getting paid to be weird all day, combined with the idea at the core of the book, Would You Rather? Again, also a game people may know. And the core of that idea is, what if you were just put into crazy situations? What would you do to escape them? And so that gave me the idea of a game about ridiculous situations and ways to get out of them. So that August 2010, I called my friend John. He is a friend of 26 years who I used to do extracurricular math and poetry with in elementary school. In fact, he became a mathematician. And I called him and I said, I have this idea for a game. Neither of us had any experience. I asked if he would want to invent one. He was like, sure. And he immediately offered an improvement. We began working on it for about 3.5 out of 4 years. We would get together every few weeks, every month, and just come up with weird situations and resources. And then finally, after a few years, he said, I think we have enough to test. So in 2014, we began to play test it. Again, not really having any idea what we were doing. And then that fall, I went to business school, and that's where I began learning a little about how to be an entrepreneur and took some entrepreneurial classes. I don't use almost anything I learned in business school right now, and I've taught myself almost everything I know about sales, but it gave me the confidence and the network and helped me answer little questions and helped me understand how to sell off companies and how to value them. So there was some usefulness, and it also just gave me that extra push I needed to move forward. And the summer of 2016, I graduated and I went on to one job and then another. And then I ended up in New York City and got laid off of a job after 6 weeks. And I sat in a park for 4 hours and I just cried. And I was like, what am I going to do? And then I realized now that I've been laid off, I could start this business I've been thinking about and working on off and on for 7 years. So it was launched from the ashes of losing a job in a playground in New York City where I sat for 4 hours because I didn't have my house key on me and I was locked out of my house. So I was watching kids on the playground and decided to start a business for real. So,
and here you are.
Yeah, so we're 5 games in, 7 countries in, a few hundred stores in, and it all came because I wanted to be weird for a living and because I was trying to make $1 million for business school.
Hey, and you know what? If it worked.
Right.
May not be the most direct way to do it, but you did it.
Well, the joke about games is you do not go into them to make money, but I didn't know that at the time.
Yeah, the joke is how do you make $1 million in board gaming is to start off with $1 million.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
So, start off with $2 million.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Put up with
You
2
only
million.
lose one. It's a good
Exactly, no big
investment.
deal at all.
Yeah. That's awesome. What a great story. I had no idea. That's awesome. I mean, you've done well. Wing It was a great game. It was a lot of fun playing it. Like I said, there was some alcohol involved, a few beers at the brewery there, so it was a good time. So and like you said, you got 5 games out now. What are the other ones?
So we published Wing It Beyond, and that is a standalone sci-fi-ish expansion, themes space travel apocalypse. And, like in the core game, you're using funny random resources to get out of ridiculous situations, but we then added in surprise cards, like surprise new ways to play. So when I'm pitching to stores, the example I always like to give is, there's the Steve card, and basically it's, Steve's your neighbor. He's a pretty boring guy, all around, just clueless about everything going on, and every player has to include Steve in their story. So that's Wing It Beyond with space, travel, apocalypse, all funny ways the world can end, including laughing gas, by the way, all sorts of fun ones. Our third game, which was not connected at all to Wing It, is the $1,000,000 Doodle. In a sentence, it's about collectively creating funny, creative companies and products and then pitching them to each other and deciding which one to invest $1,000,000 in. So think like if Shark Tank, the TV show, and Telestrations, the game, had a baby, that baby would be the $1,000,000 Doodle. All of the elements of building on each other's creativity and then, pitching these new crazy products, in the style of Shark Tank. You'll have these companies that grow out of just 2 images you combine, like flaming hearts and 2 worms intertwined. And it turns out that that's actually a dating app for worms, for example. Just to give one example.
Because there's not enough dating apps for worms out there, so
Yeah,
it's good to fill that niche.
exactly. And then our fourth game came out this fall and had a really, really good, successful launch. That is called Jewish Card Revoked. If anybody's wondering, yes, we did license the brand Card Revoked from Cards for All People. They make the best selling Black Card Revoked, Latino Card Revoked, Gay Card Revoked, and all the expansions. Black Card Revoked, I do say, is best selling because they are in 5,000 stores at least. And Cards for All People is actually a multi-million-dollar company as of last year. And I just cold Instagram chatted their co-founder and said, I've seen you speak on a Gamma webinar and at a town hall. I really like what you're doing. Have you thought about making a Jewish card revoked? Is it in the works? I'd love to help. And he wrote back and said something like, oh, it's funny you should mention that. Our lawyer's been asking about it forever. And I'm like, that is like so stereotypical that you just like hinted the fact that your lawyer is a Jew because that's like classic. And I didn't say that to him. And then he said, like, actually got the idea for Card Revoked from a rabbi about like chosenness. And I was like, this is even more awkward, but that's cool. And then we like had a meeting the next week on Monday for an hour and it went really well. So we met for another hour. We're very similar people. And then that was in February. And around August 1st, I ordered the game. And then we had oversold. We had sold over 500 by the time they arrived a month late during Hanukkah. But they did arrive this fall and actually got a lot of good press, both in the U.S. and also got it picked up by 3 Israeli newspapers as well. So we now have copies of the Jewish Card Revoked on their way to or in Slovakia and Israel, and I'm not sure where else, but mostly in the U.S.
That's incredible.
So yeah, if anybody's online right now and looks up JTA, Jewish Card Revoked, JTA is the Jewish Telegraph Agency, and it's like the AP, the Associated Press of Jewish Media. So they were one of about 14 papers I cold emailed, or sometimes had a connection, so warm emailed. I only got 2 papers to cover me, but those papers' coverage got picked up a lot of places, so that really helped early on.
Isn't it amazing, though, going back to where you said you reached out to the guy who did Black Card Revoked just cold, and the gaming industry as a whole, it has been so easy to approach people. And like I was nervous the first time I reached out to somebody to be on my show, and it's what an industry. Just no other way to put it, but wow. Like, just reaching out to people cold, like, you don't even know them. They don't even know you. And you're just like, hey. And then you make Jewish card revoked. So after a cold call from listening to a webinar, I mean, it's stories
Yeah.
like that make this industry so fun.
Right, it's very flat. And the way I've explained it to people is if you own games and really like games, you could own 30, you could own 200, you could own several hundred. If you own a phone, you probably own one phone or two. If you own a car, you and your spouse might own two cars, but like you probably own one car. I mean, they're like crazy rich people who own a few cars, but like with games, you don't have to have a lot of money to own a lot of games. And so I think part of what creates an industry where people are so supportive and accessible is partly just the nature of gaming and being a gamer is that, expanding interest in gaming and popularity of gaming expands a pie for everybody, for
Yep.
all game designers and publishers,
Yeah.
right?
Rising tide
So,
raises all ships. Exactly.
yeah,
Yeah.
it actually is a microcosm of the not at all actually recently disproven, but also not very true saying, rising tide lifts all boats. In the game industry, like I believe that's actually a true thing.
Oh yeah. No,
Yeah.
absolutely. I some of my friends that they always are asking me about my or board like my board game company and like, well, how do you compete with people like Settlers of Catan? Which, by the way, how do you say that? You say
Catan.
okay, good. We can continue for this interview then. No, I've never shut anybody off for saying it quote unquote incorrectly, but that's the thing, right? Like, I'm not in competition with Klaus Teuber, right? I'm not competing with Catan. I'm competing, like you said. I'm just trying to get on your bookshelf or your game shelf or closet, or people have rooms. I don't have a game room yet. I'm working on it. I'm just trying to get in there, and like you said, just we're not in competition with each other, and we're just trying to get you to experience more games, different types of games, different styles of games, different price points of games, right? Like, that's the whole thing. Like, people are like, aren't games expensive? Well, yeah, but they're also cheap. Like, go to a game shop and there's a $10 game and you walk in, but I guarantee you there's also, $100 game in there if you look. So, yeah, but yeah, we're not in competition. It's such a great industry that you reach out to anybody and they're like, "Hey, yeah, let me help you out." Oh, hang on, I got it, but don't do that. Do this instead.
Yeah. I mean, buying a game is an easy, cheap dopamine hit that gets you all excited. I feel the same way about buying books. And I own a lot of party games. It doesn't mean I have enough, right? Like you always need your next hit. Like, and, it's safer than crack and it's probably less expensive. So like as far as like addictions go, this one's pretty good.
Yeah. Problem is storing them. Well, you don't have to like store crack. Like, you use it up, it's gone.
Takes more
Uh,
space. But I compare it often to movies because
sure.
obviously game stores and, to some extent, game publishers and designers are in quote competition for the attention span of people who have Netflix or could go to you used to be able to go to theaters regularly. And when you think about it, I may discuss a movie a year later with someone, or I may discuss it a week later. Or if I go alone, I may never discuss it with anyone. And that might provide a little bit of entertainment. But I buy a game, I could literally, as the case was with Taboo, I could be, enjoying 30 to 40 minutes of playing for over 6 years.
Yeah. Oh,
I mean, that's
absolutely.
insane. Like the ROI, the return on the investment of a $30 game is phenomenal
Yeah.
if it's good.
Well, in my episode for Catan, I talk about how my physical copy of Catan, has been played over 200 times. And that's it was a $40 game at the time. It's $50 now, maybe more. I don't know. But mine was a $40 copy at 200 times. You're talking about a quarter for every time I played that game. And I'm not done playing that game. I might have to get another copy because that one's kind of, worn out. And I didn't know about card sleeves back then. So, uh, that game, that game was my first real hobby game, and it looks like it. It's old, it is well loved, and it is just kind of falling apart. But
Sure, sure.
it's such a it's a game that I love it. I still play it. But yeah, I mean, like you said, return on investment. I mean, my latest addiction is print and plays. Man, you got $3 print and play. I play it one time. I feel like, hey, I got my money's worth out of this game. Was it
Yeah,
good? Eh, it was $3.
ours is free. Our print and play. We used to charge 10. I'm like, not many people are buying it anyway. Let's just make it free. Other people do that. We have a free version of Wing It Beyond and Wing It on our site. I should mention if you go to flyingleapgames.com, there's a Play Wing It for free online tab up top that we made for people during the pandemic to enjoy for free.
Nice.
And by the way, that cost well over $1,000 in a developer, and that was definitely a loss, but like it seemed important to do. And I will just put out there that the current bane of my existence is I should actually follow up with people who ordered the print and play. And I'm like, yeah, but maybe they really just wanted to print it themselves.
Man,
And
that is an industry, or not an industry, but that is a group of people, man.
yeah, it's a
I'm in
free
a
group.
couple. I'm in a couple print and play groups on Facebook, and they're pretty serious. I'm branching out. I usually just stuck with some smaller card games. I've gotten into some we'll call them mild board games. But those people, man, some of those guys are building it on and cardboard and you know sticky tacking it down, and they've got the fabric tape so it folds, and I'm like, wow, yeah, I'll be over here. They're talking about how to make the custom die. You like you put it on this little, you print it off on this little decal thing, and then you get it wet and slide it onto the like a model car from the 80s. Like you can
Why
do
would
that.
why would they do that?
Well, if you have a custom die, right? So like if you're playing like zombie dice, they're not just straight D6s.
Yeah, okay.
You have brains and footprints,
Yeah, no, that makes
shotgun
sense.
blasts. The happy game of eating brains while you're a zombie and trying not to get shotgunned.
Oh, yeah, it was up in the hundreds, the number of games about zombies I found on Board Game Geek
Oh,
recently.
crazy! So if I traveled out to Boston to hang out with you for a weekend, what game are we playing? What's on your table?
Well, if you're coming for a whole weekend, we're not just playing one
Whoa,
game then.
whoa, whoa! Obviously not. Obviously
Yeah,
not.
just
But what's
just
the what's what's the first game? What's the game
Okay,
that
well, first of all, are you arriving before everybody else?
probably?
Okay. So if you're arriving early, then I'll introduce you to my favorite abstract two-player, which is Shobu. Have you played it?
No, I know it. I can see the box in my mind, but I've never played it.
Shobu is from Smirk and Dagger. If people know Kurt, who's the head of that company, he is a fantastic human being. He's actually a mentor for the fellowship I mentioned earlier and a fabulous marketer. And his game is absolutely gorgeous. It looks like it came out of an ancient culture thousands of years ago. It was, in fact, created just 2 or 3 years ago. And that's definitely on our table because it adds a mechanism I have never seen before, which is that every turn involves two moves that are mirror reflections of each other. So you have four boards at once, and you're facing off my black stones versus your white stones on four boards. I have to push your stones off any one of those boards, but I'm not just pushing along. Most of these games, you just do a move and then the person goes, and then you go back and forth. In this one, I have a passive move where I can move forward but can't push anyone off, and I have an aggressive move where I can push people off. And they have to be mirror reflections of each other. And it is one of the coolest innovations I've seen in gaming. So we're playing that one first, but then other people show up, and I have a really hard time just imagining even the right group for my absolute favorite game, which is Magic Maze. So if we're getting a group of gamers together, we're definitely playing one of the neatest games of what I would say like the last 10 years, which is Magic Maze. Has anyone ever mentioned Magic Maze on one of your
No,
interviews?
I'm not even. I've never heard of it.
So have you heard of King Domino?
Oh yes.
Exactly. King Domino was Spiel des Jahres, the same year that Magic Maze was nominated for that award. And everyone's heard of King Domino and no one's heard of Magic Maze, and it drives me nuts. because they're both good games, but Magic Maze is an incredibly unique and innovative game. Get this combination. I'm just going to briefly describe it. You can cut this later if you want. Magic Maze is a cooperative game where the board changes every time because it's a magic mall that you're creating as you go, and it's played in complete silence. Why? Because you're playing, all of you, whether you're one or eight people, whether you're one or eight people, you're playing four different magic characters who are trying to escape a mall by stealing what they need for the next quest and then finding the doors to the mall and getting out of there. And the thing is, they have to be completely silent. You have to be completely silent as players because mall security is after you.
Of course.
Yeah, exactly. So mechanism matches the theme really well. And the other really fascinating innovation, well, I assume it's an innovation, I don't know for sure, of Magic Maze is that in Magic Maze, there are no assigned characters. There are roles, but no one is one role. It's not a one-to-one. You're all going at once at any given time. Because you're not a role, you're a direction. So like you, Adam, are portals, like you can go through portals, and west. And I'm escalators and east. And our buddy over here is north and south, and our other buddy is escalators and west. So we're all different directions or portals or escalators, and we can move all those characters any way. And as you build the board, it starts with one piece. It can get up to 24 pieces. And you're doing this all on a timer in silence. You're got to get what you need, get out on a timer in total silence with no assigned turns.
Oh my god!
If that doesn't stress you out, you're not a normal human being.
I was like, you had me. Well, first of all, you said playing in silence. I'm like, I would not be good at this game. But then you're like, I'm still like intrigued. And then you're like, and you got a timer. I'm like, ooh, maybe. But I think it sounds great. I just looked it up. It says it plays in 15 minutes.
Yeah, it's really fast because you lose quickly.
That's a chaotic 15 minutes.
Yeah, I played it first in my full gorilla suit. I have a gorilla suit I wear for Southwest flights or.
I mean, why wouldn't you?
Yeah, exactly. And in my very first game convention, I was in my gorilla suit wandering around, and this group of young people invited me to join. And we won, and I was totally amazed at the game. And what I realized later is you don't usually win Magic Maze.
Oh.
There's just like it's just so hard. There's the chance always that you won't land on a timer. There's 4 timers that are on the board, but they're distributed among the 24 pieces that make up the magic mall. So you never know when you're going to draw a piece of the mall that has the timer. So if you draw it last, you're screwed, right? And so the point kind of being it's stressful and chaotic and cooperative and fun and stressful and exciting and involves a different board every time, which means the game is different every time. And if that sounds a lot like being an entrepreneur, you are exactly right. I find that Magic Maze itself is basically a metaphor for my life. And maybe that's why I like it, because it's a way to play my life in a slightly, lower stakes scenario. Yeah.
That's awesome. No, I want to put that on my list of ones to keep my eye out for sure.
Yeah,
it sounds like you need the right group of people to play with, though.
Yeah, you need people who aren't just sharp and smart, but they're willing to be and even excited to be kind of stressed out.
Yeah, have you played the Pandemic Rapid Response?
Never heard of it.
It's one that you're flying an airplane around the world, and it's a real-time game. We've got timers that you're flipping over, and you're working with the other people. You'll have like a standard type of pandemic character, and you're trying to get the necessary cubes of the right color to the back of the plane, and then get the plane over the right country to drop the cubes. And in the meantime, you're trying to maintain this, timer you're flipping over. And my son and I actually got the game, coincidentally enough, right at the start of the pandemic. So it's a blast, and it's pretty stressful because you're trying to, you're trying to work together, and you're trying to roll these dice and push your luck and get the right colors and get them everything where you need to be, and you're trying to fly the plane. So around the board is the the map of the world is kind of like this. The countries are listed around the board, like your standard score tracker, but it's like the countries of the world. You've got this little plastic plane that moves around the board, but you got to be at the pilot seat. Then you got to roll this. It's it's one of my favorite. I'm not a big real time game fan, but I think it's because they're rarely done well,
Hmm.
and or at least rarely done well to where I want to play them.
Right.
But that one, my son and I we had a blast playing Pandemic Rapid Response. So
Nice.
yeah, it was pretty funny. You never know what you're gonna find when you go to like websites that board games are on sale, and you're like, oh, well, let me click over here. Oh, $10. Don't mind if I do.
Yeah.
So
Well, after that level of stress, my guess is that we will need to wind down after Magic Maze, and so I'll put out on the table either Who's It or Just Tell Me What to Do. So Who's It is a very light new favorite party game and really funny. And then Just Tell Me What to Do. I didn't actually mention after Drew Card Revoked our fifth game, which is stuck at port now about a month, but should be out any day, is Just Tell Me What to Do, a party game of all the advice you never needed. And, we know that, at any given point, many of us are making big, challenging life decisions like, should I marry a mime? Or should I purchase ancient cave dwellings and Airbnb them? Or simpler decisions like, should I, be on the first commercial flight to Mars? And so we created a game of making those decisions and then giving people advice to help them make the decision. So everyone else has a hand of, 4 advice cards, and then they basically choose advice of comedians or famous authors and just various funny people. And then you argue why your quote is the best for that decision. Like, should I marry a mime? So you'll have a quote that's like,
the answer
don't
to
be,
that is obviously no. You should not. You should
yeah,
not
right.
marry a mime. But
Unless you really like people who listen to you. So
they'd be
that's
really good at Magic Maze, though.
that's true. Yeah, the talent part. Yeah, at least. So we would wind down with either Who's It or Just Tell Me What to Do. My current favorite of my own games to play is probably Just Tell Me What to Do or the $1,000,000 Doodle. So if I have a chance to introduce people to one of those, I probably do.
Well, just tell me what to do sounds awesome. So I'll be keeping my eye out for that to hit the friendly local game shop.
Yeah, it will definitely be there. I think we might have missed this year, but we have another week to make it. We'll see.
You know, it happens.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
not every year you get a global pandemic clogging up all kinds of problems.
Yep, yep.
So, do you play board games at lunch?
No, I work by myself and well, I work by myself most of the time and I work for myself all the time, and I work through lunch because I get up really, really late, and so lunch would be like 3 or 4 o'clock. So like, I just need to keep working. Then at that point, I don't stop for lunch.
I can understand that. Yeah, we played a lot at lunch at my last company, and I'm working on getting a group together at my new company. And then some days when I can't, I got a buddy that I play over Zoom. We'll play some roll and rights over Zoom, just to get the
Well,
game
that's
in.
cool.
Yeah.
No, I think it's great that people take a lunch break to play lunch. I think at my old job before business school at a fair trade company, with only half an hour, we probably wouldn't have. But, we did a Hebrew table over lunch sometimes or a Spanish table or did, tech study, Jewish tech study. So I guess we could have taken the time to play a game. I think with an hour lunch, it's much more feasible. But I like to have my game playing mostly take place at night. But in theory, I love the idea of taking a work break at lunch. I bet that's really great for just happiness and satisfaction at work. You get to know your coworkers and you get a really good solid break. And with a lot of the games I play, you get a good laugh in too.
Absolutely. I mean, that's what kind of when we started the group, it was a lot of us from the same silo, if you will, the same division, and then people started finding out, like they would see us heat up our lunch and then go to this conference room, and then people were like, well, "What are you doing in that conference room?" And we're like, "We're playing games," and they're like, "Can I play?" And we're like, "Well, yeah, you can play." And then it starts off with 4 or 5 of us playing Catan. And when I left, we had about 20 people across campus through 3 or 4 different buildings on the campus. We played tons, like 40 or 50 different games. And every Friday we met at the centralized dining hall, and we'd have like 8 or 10 of us there playing games on Friday in the middle of this big giant dining facility. And then even there, people would be like, more game groups started kind of popping up, but they would kind of stay to themselves. But I tried. I'm an extrovert. I tried to go introduce myself and get the guys to, join us, but they were kind of, shied away from it.
Well,
So,
that sounds amazing. And I hope in year 5 of this show that you're doing that all across corporate America, everyone is pausing during their lunch hour for at least 30 minutes to play games.
oh, absolutely. I hope they do. There's a lot of good 30-minute games out there. Speaking of which, what would be your go-to 30-minute game?
Sure. So if we hadn't already played Magic Maze, which is again very fast paced and stressful, during
I don't know if that would be the best idea at lunch. Hey, once you get a break from your stressful job, and let's go play this stressful game for 15
well,
minutes where we're robbing them all.
just wait. If we hadn't already played Magic Maze, I would have had us end the night with Stay Cool. So Stay Cool
Oh,
is definitely my go-to 30-minute. It is fun and exciting and really entertaining to watch people who are very smart multitask very unsuccessfully.
oh my
So
God. It is a blast.
yeah. So just for any listeners who haven't heard of it, Stay Cool is a game where you have to answer questions verbally from one other player while you spell out the answers to questions using dice. And those are questions asked of you by another player. So two people are firing questions at you at once. You've got to answer both kinds of questions, but one with dice and one verbally. And then it gets more complicated from there. In the second round, you also have to say when to turn the timer before the timer runs out or your turn ends immediately. And in the highest level, at least that I've played, you also have to say when to turn the timer, but the timer is hidden from you, so you can't see it. And then there's apparently like all sorts of funny ways to make it even more complicated. So
Yeah,
I
I think
really
you,
like
you,
it
you
a
pretty
lot.
well covered it. The
Yeah,
game
I'm
is
looking at
chaos. It is an
total
utter
chaos.
blast. It is a blast.
Yeah. So that would be my go-to 30-minute game right now in life.
Oh, that's a good
Yeah.
one. What about a 60-minute? You're going to play it for a full lunch hour. What are you throwing down on
Yeah.
the table?
This game could take a lot less. It says 15 to 30 on the box, and I have played a 2 hour, 45-minute version of it, but I think we were playing it wrong for part of it. So I would say 60 is probably reasonable. That is Fire Tower. Fire Tower can definitely be played in an hour, especially with a couple people. So Fire Tower is one of my favorite light strategy games made by my friends Gwen and Sam, who I met at my very first game convention where I was ever exhibiting. And yeah, it's basically a game of trying to burn down each other's fire towers with these 3D flame gems that are really cool. And I'm looking right now at the fantastic and beautiful artistic expansions, which include things like a fire hawk and buckets, handmade little buckets that you can use to put out the fire. So Fire Tower is definitely again, it says 15 to 30. I would say you could definitely play around in 30 to 60, unless you're like my nephew and I, who first, who knows what reason, managed to start a game in Brooklyn and finish it in St. Louis. I had to actually recreate the entire game with another set. It went almost 3 hours and didn't have time to finish in Brooklyn. So I recommend those two. Well, sorry, that one for a 30-minute. Actually, for 60 minutes. If you have a bigger group, an untapped one that's easy to play over lunch as well is Linky. Linky, Linkee. It's not as well known in the States, but it's very well known in the UK because it's from a best-selling party game company in the UK. And if you've ever played Chameleon, that's from the same company. They're a really, really awesome company called Big Potato Games. And Linky, what's cool about it is it's sort of like a trivia game that builds on each answer. So you'll answer 3 simple questions, I believe it is, But then the combination of all of those answers will lead you to the final answer, and you have to figure out the final answer. So it's like a multi-level trivia
Huh.
game of connecting different clues and to get the final answer.
I've never heard of that one. I'll have to look
Well,
into
there
that
you
one.
go.
Yeah, I wrote that down. Don't you worry. I wrote that down. I'll definitely give that one
I want to be at
a
lunch now. I want to come to lunch.
look.
If people are going to play my favorite games, I want to be at lunch.
Well, right now we're playing. We played some King of Tokyo and some various versions of Clue. I didn't realize there were so many different versions, not IP, like actual versions of Clue.
Huh,
And
that's
we've had a lot of fun with some of them. I can tell you that. So that's awesome. So do you have a hidden gem game?
I don't know if this particular one is hidden, but I really, really enjoy Bosk because it's gorgeous and simple to teach and still has, enough strategy to keep me interested. So BOSK. So it's a game of seasons with trees. They're physical kind of 3D cardboard trees. So you set up your trees and you try to dominate certain paths in the forest, and then leaves fall from the trees, and you try to dominate the floor of the forest with the leaves. So
Yes.
it's a very beautiful basic strategy game, and I don't think I've ever introduced it to someone who's heard of it. So I guess I'd call it a hidden gem. Although Daryl Andrews, the designer who also made Sagrada, is definitely well known in the sense. I mean, he's published over 25 games at this point, which is quite a repertoire.
And
He's a big,
Sagrada's kind of a decently well known game.
yeah. No, I'm sure it pays a
Stained
lot of.
glass window game with dice. It's a Sagrada's awesome.
I've
I
never
for,
actually played it because I'm not into dice games, but it looks cool.
oh, it's fun.
So
It's
that's
fun.
probably that's a hidden gem. I also have on my shelf Rival Networks from Formal Ferret Games,
Ooh.
one of Gil Hubba's games. Yeah, I have the two-person version, and I really like the Rival Networks.
I don't think I've ever played Rival. I played Networks with a couple of the
Yeah.
expansions. I don't think I've ever played Rival. That, like you said, yeah, that's the 2 player edition. Networks is a lot of fun. I like that game
Okay,
a
yeah. So
lot.
I've actually never played Networks. I got to be a playtester for Rival Networks in New York City when I used to live there, and we had a regular Tuesday night group. I would go and test people's games, or people test mine, and I really like Rival Networks. So I did pledge on that Kickstarter, and I'm actually not someone who pledges on Kickstarters a whole lot. I just really like going into stores and getting to read about games and getting recommendations. I like to kind of feel my way through a game store. Also, I visited almost 300 game stores because that's a big part of how I do my sales work. And that's how I get to know a lot of retailers. And so when I'm in a store traveling, which is so often, that tends to be where I do my game purchases too.
No, there's nothing wrong with that.
Well, I did just remember another couple hidden gems. I will admit I've only played each of them once, but really enjoyed them and hope to get them at some point. One is Captain Sonar, which is another real time game in teams. It
I
is
just
really,
played that this week or last week. Yeah,
really fun, really
yeah,
fun. A
it's
great
a
time.
good one.
And then another one that I would also call a hidden gem because I don't see it around a whole lot by Chris Rio of Cheer Up Games is called Swearmints. And I'm kind of a hard to please when it comes to party games because I make party games. I'm kind of a party game snob. And Swearmints is really good. Basically, you're combining different nonsense words to create a swear word, and then you have to say what it means. And so coming up with funny swear words and then coming up with random definitions.
Swear mint. Ooh, I'll have to look for that one. Does it come in a mint tin?
Yes, it's really cute.
Like you, I have games everywhere I can stick a game. Hey, here's a nice spot. I'll shove a game here. Hey, look, an opening. I'll shove a game here.
Yeah, it's hard to find space. When I'm able to use more shelving or living in places that have more shelving, it's easier. But right now we have one bookshelf divided among 3 roommates, and I'm actually doing that right now. I have some in the closet. I have some in a cabinet over there. I have some at home where my parents live that I just never brought from there. I have some under the coffee table, some in my bedroom.
So, the ones at your parents' house, just curious, are they the old Milton Bradley?
No, no. So I mean, I own Life from when I was a kid, and we own older versions that are like very classic of Chinese checkers and checkers. But I went home during part of the pandemic to keep my parents out of stores last year.
You gotta
And
do what you gotta do.
right. And because I had been nomadic for a while, I decided to stay at home for a while. So I just left some games there and we really enjoyed playing Kanagawa together. We really love playing Trekking the National Parks, which is another light strategy game that is one of my favorites. Yeah. So
It's a beautiful game.
couldn't fit all of them when I came back, and I can't fit them in all of my new place anyway. So it just makes sense. They'd have to be, I mean, they would be sitting in a closet here or down in the basement, which isn't a huge deal, but like I don't actually need all my games at any given time.
No, I just asked. I was back at my parents' house over Thanksgiving, and I was down in the old game closet from my childhood, and it's just so many old Milton Bradley and Parker Brother games, and some of the games are actually hilarious. They're like from my parents when they first got married, and so like it's like Rook for two, and I'm like, what the heck is Rook for two? You know, I have Rook. I taught myself how to play Rook because I came across it in a book I was reading, and I'm like, ooh, takes 4 players, but I found an app, and I taught myself how to play it, and I've taught some other people how to play it. But I found some of those awesome, awesome late 80s, early 90s Milton Bradley games like Polar Dare, where you are penguins jumping on ice floes and you are trying to move your penguins from one side of the board to the other, but there's also a polar bear that jumps across
Mm,
the ice floes and sends your penguins back to start. It doesn't say he eats them, but I'm pretty sure he eats them. But it was a kids game, so maybe they didn't eat them. I don't know.
yeah.
But you know, I found like the old Milton Bradley games, the old Play-Doh ones. Did you ever play those, like Splat and Grape Escape?
Oh no.
Oh man, yeah. You would like you had the two halves and you smashed them together, the mold, and you made a little grape, and you had to go through this factory like mousetrap, and come. You're trying to get to the other side without getting crushed into jam or cut in half or stomped by a boot. There's no skill involved. You just roll a d6. Um, but I mean, so when you said had some at your parents' house, I'm like, ooh, do you have the old like? Remember all the? Oh yeah, we had Polar Dare and all kinds of old crazy ones. So you never know what you're gonna find in your parents' or grandparents' basement. My son and I were really big into Millborn, the card racing game, which
Hmm.
came out in like the 50s. My wife's dad had a copy in his basement. My son was talking about the game, and his grandpa's like, "Oh, I think I have that in the basement." And my grandma and his grandma was like, "Yeah, I think so." They went to bring up like this game Millborn from like had to be from the 60s. I'm like, that's awesome. It's like, what else you got down here, guys? You never know what you're gonna find in your grandparents' basement of board games. I can tell you that.
I was unfortunately not into games enough as a child that I would have thought to look. And they, unfortunately, my grandparents, once they passed away when I was 14, 15. But my grandparents later, may they rest in peace, they would not have had anything extra ever in their house. Like it was just a spotless place. So like Grandma Millie and Grandpa Izzy, may they rest in peace, when they passed away and when I was in my mid 20s, we're at a point when you couldn't have found a thing that didn't belong in their house, and they would have never touched a game that I could imagine. So I will say that my mom has told me she wants to learn to play mahjong, which was surprising, but her mom played it and was a good player apparently. So I think in honor of my grandma Donna, probably the two of us will learn to play mahjong, which is a very classic game for both Jewish and Chinese women.
Yeah, it's actually on my list of games to learn as well. It's a very classic game. I would love to learn it with all the tiles and the winds and the dragons, and I'm like, it's like very pretty domino looking tiles, and it's like, man,
Mhm.
looks beautiful. I'm like, if only I understood the game.
Yeah, apparently, if you understand the game better and just the cultural background too, then there's that one scene in Crazy Rich Asians that you'll understand a lot better too.
Yeah,
So maybe someday I'll learn mahjong and rewatch Crazy Rich Asians and then say, "Oh, there was such deep significance to this scene that I didn't really feel that now I do."
yeah. I got all the feels now.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
missed it the first time. So if you're playing a game that has colors, do you have a color that you gravitate towards?
I think I probably used to always choose blue, but because I've been trying to branch out as an adult, because that's most of what I wear. All 5 of our games are blue or turquoise, some purplish blue or just straight up blue. So I've been trying to branch out. I don't really I more have one I avoid, which is I do not like red at all. But beyond blue, if I have to choose another, it's going to be yellow or green, probably. I tend to avoid very feminine colors that are sort of stereotypically feminine.
Yeah, we don't see those colors a lot in games though either.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny how people have like that specific color. My buddy, it's green every time, green. But yeah, that's been one of my favorite questions lately, and I'm working on making a chart, and I'm gonna like put all the guests in there and keep track of who's favorite, like what is the favorite color amongst all of my guests, and see where that lands, and see if there's any pattern to it.
I would not be surprised if it's blue only because that's apparently one of the most selected favorite colors just in general. Not for games, but just in life.
Well, I'm sorry to say my favorite color is red or
Yeah, we
orange.
can't be friends, but that's okay.
It's all right. We don't have to be friends. You can stay in Boston.
Good. I don't want to come back.
You gotta come back. Yeah, come back. Geekway be back in May this year. Just come to play.
Oh, yeah. See, as a game designer and publisher, I don't even think of doing that,
Yeah, they've got they got the play and win room. Then they have. I mean, you could put some of your games in there, and then
Oh,
play
true.
them, and you can play all kinds of games. And there's publishers there, small publishers, indie publishers that you can support. And there's also people playtesting. There's a whole playtest room that you could go in and just playtest people's games and give them feedback.
No, that's neat. Yeah. Yeah, it's a possibility. I just looked it up. It's mid-May this year, and I could see being in St. Louis then.
It's not too hot and steamy and gross and humid yet.
Right, right.
Not in May. I would not advise coming out here for a gaming convention in August.
Yeah.
End of July and August, not a good time to be in St. Louis for any reason.
Well, I played soccer about 14 years, and I went to soccer camp every summer for 7 years when I was a kid, growing up in St. Louis. And sometimes I wonder, how did I like that? Like, how did I like playing outside in St. Louis in the summer every year for 7 years? That just, now it sounds terrible. The humidity is so much.
You didn't know any different.
Maybe that's it. Maybe I didn't know what things could be like. Yeah.
You didn't know what it was like to not chew the air.
Yeah. Well, when I lived in Colorado for a summer during business school, I was driving across the country, across the Midwest, and summers in Denver had been so pleasant. You wanted to be outside during lunch. I would take a lot of walks. No, almost no humidity, comparably. And I remember driving across towards Kansas, and about halfway there, I got out of the car and it just hit me so hard. The humidity physically hit me. I was like, you could cut this with a knife.
Yeah.
It is so much more noticeable coming from the dry Rocky Mountain region. You really don't know what you're missing if you've never, spent a lot of time in a drier climate and realize, wow, St. Louis is genuinely unpleasant.
I remember this summer walking out of my office, and like you walk out of the office and you choke on air. Like
Oh
air is choking you because it is so thick with moisture, and it's like I think I'm drowning, but I'm breathing air, sort of.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Molly, I'd like to thank you for being on my show today. If anybody would like to reach out to you, how can they do that?
Well, the best way to find us is Flying Leap Games on Instagram. The second best is Flying Leap Games on Facebook. And the third best is at Penguin Soaring on Twitter.
That penguin soaring. Nice.
And there's a penguin soaring with a jetpack on the cover of Wing It.
Yeah.
And on Wing It Beyond, he's soaring with
going up.
He's soaring into a spaceship. And I would just encourage anybody who's thinking about publishing a game, anybody who has published a game but can't decide whether they want to keep going on their own or sell it to another publisher, reach out to me and ask me about my first night ever at the Gamma trade show. And I will tell you about how, I met some retailers in a bar when I was just about broke. And, they asked to see my game while I ate my cheese. I had some cheese at the bar from the store, and they said, "Hey, why don't I look at your game while you eat your cheese?" And Because of that one night and 4 hours of playing, we sold out in 4 weeks. So 4 hours of playing and giving advice. That
So
is.
was it a cheese stick or?
I take my cheese straight. I had just come back from the grocery store. I had a full bag of groceries at this nice bar. I went up to the bar. Actually, Fantasy Shop staff were the only people I knew at that bar. We walked up together, and I just walked into an inland of retailers and was just sitting with them for a while chatting. And then one of them said, why don't I look at your game while you eat your cheese? And when he did, he said, Are you on PayPal? Because I would PayPal you for 10 of these. And I was like, yeah, that was a good size order. He said, Are you selling these? He's like, I could sell 5 of these tomorrow. I could sell 5 of these right now. Watch me. And he begins to sell Wing It to other retailers to pitch it. And they started playing, and they got another retailer out of bed, and we got kicked out of the one bar at midnight. I went to another area with another bar. I mean, it's all in the same sort of resort area. And then at 2:15, we parted ways at 2:15 in the morning, and started getting orders the next day, and they just kept coming, and they didn't stop for 4 weeks. So it's really the place to meet retailers if you want to go into retail. So I tell that story just always to say, like, if you want to reach out to me and talk about how to get into retail, please do. And also, please sign up to be part of Gamma as well.
Hopefully travel restrictions will lift here shortly, and I'll have some spare funds to make my way out there for Gamma coming up.
Yeah, little trick is just try not to fly into Reno. It's very expensive to get to Reno. But I actually booked 3 flights for under what it would cost to do round trip to Reno. So I'm going to Denver and then Reno, and then like driving to Oakland with someone after, and then flying back from Oakland. So it's a little more time, but I'm able to get some other trips out of it as well.
Sounds awesome.
Yeah, it's one of the most fun times of the year. I absolutely love it. I mean, one problem is I'm going to stay up till 2 to 4 a.m. every single night, which is partly because it's fun and partly because that's when some of the best networking happens.
Well, also, you said you wake up late anyway, so.
Not at Gamma. Gamma, you have to get up early. Gamma has sessions starting at like 8 or 9 in the morning. It's terrible.
You live on coffee at that point.
I don't drink coffee, but I do have a cup of black tea every day, and that helps me survive.
Caffeine one way or the other. And as usual, if you guys want to reach out to me, it's facebook.com/groups/Eat Lunch and Board Game, or my website is eatlunchandboardgame.com. And remember, board games build bridges.
Stay in tune with all things sports around Indiana and the nation with the Crash Course Podcast. Each week, we tackle the big storylines from the world of the Colts, Pacers, and the Indiana college scene, while also keeping a pulse on the nation. We record live weekly at twitch.tv/3C Media and can be found on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, wherever podcasts can be heard. You can catch the Crash Course Podcast.
When you're gaming, why not be comfy? Go over to supportplayer.org. Click on the cards, pieces, and dice to get some merch. These t-shirts are some of the most comfortable I have ever worn. That's supportplayer.org, and there's a link on eatlunchandboardgame.com.